convene an open session, and we'll begin with commissioners' reports and comments. Vice President Baker, would you begin, please?
I have nothing to report.
Thank you. Commissioner Wagner?
Good evening, 6 o'clock. Glad y'all could make it. We have a pretty nice showing here. I'm sure the staff's just tickled to death they're here at 6 o'clock, but that's okay. I'm here too. But anyway, just wanted to welcome you. I don't really have anything earth-shaking tonight. Thank you.
Hey, Court, would you?
We got a couple things. First, just want to congratulate the Boonesboro's We the People team. They made it to the next level of the state competition, so that's exciting. And then I'd like to wish good luck to the Smithsburg's Youth Athletics. Their 9-10 football team is going to compete in the NFL's regional flag football game at hosted by the Redskins on Sunday. So that's kind of exciting. The first
Smithsburg volleyball, right?
Smithsburg football.
Well, volleyball. Didn't volleyball win the state champion? Yeah. Yeah.
That was my next one.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Put it in line.
But so they get to go down there and compete. So it's the first time Smithsburg's ever sent a team down there. So good luck. And then Smithsburg's volleyball, congratulations. And then the last thing, I know we have a couple gentlemen here going to talk about it, or hopefully going to talk about it. But one of the things that I want to make sure we get on our agenda, we've done a lot of work and investigation with the mobile home trailer park tax, but I'd like to get put on the agenda as soon as possible that we reduce or put a cap on the tax. And I would like to, start the discussion somewhere around the $25 range at a cap on a monthly amount for the tax. And the reason why is we've done a lot of work on that. And when we look at an apartment, I'm going to use that as an example. They've got your property tax that they pay. First, you have the undeveloped land that the owner has to pay tax, and you got to pay tax on the developed portion, and that's the entire amount of property tax. Well, a trailer park, they're only paying the owners of the trailer park. They're paying the property tax on the undeveloped land. They're not paying any tax on the actual trailer itself. But I also agree with the owners of the trailers that they should not be paying a tax as if that was an $80,000 or $100,000 property. So at $25, that's right around the $25,000 to $30,000 range of a trailer. And if we can have that a discussion, I'd like to talk about that. So we can get that on the agenda.
Thank you, Court. Administrator Downey, that would be a request probably for December 3rd since we're off November 26th.
Yeah,
so
we'll
we'll do our best to get it on December 3rd. Thank you. The only thing I would like to add, last week I attended the Economic Summit hosted by the Chamber of Commerce, Fountainhead Country Club, close to 300 people in attendance. The energy level was high, and there was a lot of people excited about the outlook presented by that economist out of Baltimore. I can't pronounce his name correctly, so I won't say that. With that being said, that concludes my report. What I'd like to do next is begin with reports from county staff. Please introduce yourself and the matter to be discussed. Thank you.
David Hayes, Director of Emergency Services.
Jennifer Swisher, Programs Manager, Emergency Services.
We're here today. Bardana Woods, who's the previous Assistant Director of the Communications Center and has subsequently worked for the last several months in the Training Coordinator Quality Assurance position within the ECC, is set to retire January 31st. We're prepared to advertise for her replacement. When we originally wrote that job description, we had graded that at a grade 12. That was prior to the ECC career path upgrade of last year, and our supervisors currently work at a grade 12. We'd like to consider having this regraded for advertising purposes to a grade 13, which we believe is more appropriate for the position. It is one grade above the supervisors, provides a promotional opportunity, and I would note that the current position is held by a grade 16, so it is still a 3-grade reduction and represents significant savings to our budget. We would not need additional budgetary dollars to do so.
Would you like commissioners have a vote on that? Is that what you're requesting?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner, I have a request from the director. Is everybody okay with that? Do I hear a motion?
A motion to approve that to a grade 13 instead
Or a
of.
second?
Second.
Have first and second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Is there any other staff who'd like to report? Please introduce yourself and the matter to discuss.
Brian Albert, Operations Manager, 911 Center.
Charles Brown, Assistant Director, Emergency Management and ECC.
We're here to request additional 4 full-time staff at the Emergency Operations Center, or I'm sorry, the Emergency Communication Center, better known as the 911 Center. And we've presented a plan to the commissioners in closed session on what we think our staffing needs to be. Been through a couple of exercises with staffing plans, and we would like to request 4 new positions be added at the Emergency Communication Center.
These are dispatchers.
Dispatchers, yes, sir.
It takes about 6 months to get them ready
Correct.
to training in the class.
About 6 months.
And you have how many currently?
Currently, we have 42 full-time positions. We are authorized 44 full-time positions, so we're down 2 positions.
And the grade would be?
They are grade 8.
And the cost for the 4 full-time employees would be offset by some overtime savings?
That is correct.
So there will be,
We would probably realize that in about 4 to 6 months due to their training time, that to get them up to speed to be able to take calls on their own.
Additionally, I think it's important to note that we are expecting some increase related to the 911 fees beginning in February, so that should also provide additional revenue for the additional cost.
And the fact that we give you 4, you're always going to be too short anyway.
More than likely, we're always fighting that turnover rate. The last 4 years or 5 years, it's been 6 to 8 positions.
but these 4 hired will be better
I don't think so.
prepared for any shortages, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. That is correct.
All right, go ahead, Terry.
Are we gonna, part of the overtime savings that we're gonna get is from the supervisors, and I know we're not gonna be doing this right away, but one of the things I wanna make sure is that having that, I don't know what you're gonna call it, the upgrade.
An upgrade,
to-
yes.
For the call takers to be an on-call supervisor, so that's gonna be,
That is correct. Currently, we have 8 supervisors, and we're required to have 2 supervisors on a shift. We have 4 shifts, so that, we have no holes. We can't go down any of those. So if one of them gets sick or is off for any extended period, we pay overtime with another supervisor to fill that spot. And we've proposed to do an upgrade with people that are qualified to become supervisors. That'll give them a career path for some of our employees that currently work there, long tenured, that's currently working at the 911 center. And it will also curtail our overtime for supervisory positions.
and then we're also looking at a bonus structure for an on-call,
That is correct.
position. Okay. So,
Yeah, that's all for future.
yes.
Correct.
Right
Correct.
now, you want 4, your motion or request is for 4?
The request is for 4 full-time positions.
This is gonna have minimal impact on our general fund budget because of the savings from overtime and our share of the 911 fees that are going to be.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
All right, do I hear a motion to approve the request?
I'd motion to approve the request.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Thank you very much.
Any other staff reports? Please introduce yourself and the matter to discuss.
Good evening, Todd Moser, Real Property Administrator. This is regarding a lease at 500 Western Maryland Parkway, the Sheriff's Office. The State of Maryland leases a portion of 500 Western Maryland Parkway for the use of the District Court of Maryland Commissioner's Office. The current 10-year lease expires in May of 2020 with a 5-year tenant renewal option. The state has informed the county of its intent to renew the lease. I've also spoken to Sheriff Mullendore about the state's intent to renew the lease. They currently lease 1,572 square feet at $1,310 a month. And I believe this is just for informational purposes. I don't need a motion. Correct, Kurt?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other staff? Seeing no more staff reports, we'd like to go to citizens' participation. Those in the front row, please come forward. Name and address, please, gentlemen.
Hello, my name is Roger Vincent, 16845 Longfellow Court.
David McDonough, 16906 Pickwick Lane.
I would like to start off today about telling you about fixed income. A lot of us in Lakeside Park are on a fixed income. We have in my case, I have a military retirement from the Navy, and where I spent 32 years. I had a retirement from my sales job where I spent over 25 years, but that went in the 2008 downturn, and that all went away. So I'm left with Social Security and my Navy retirement. That's it. Fixed income. Now, every year when Lakeside raises the rent goes up exponentially now, and the tax with it goes up also because it's a percentage. So therefore, I am now paying 1/4 of my total income for rent and mortgage. I still have like 3 or 4 more years to go on my mortgage, and I'll own my unit. So, you know, there's a lot of us in there that's still paying mortgages. You guys look at the $510, that's not it. There's more to it. It's the mortgage is there also. Steve, different case, because he bought his unit at a different deal than I did, and way lower. So the newer units there, and they're moving them in quite regularly lately and putting rental people in there, and it's growing. The number of people there is growing. You're getting more money because there's more people and there's more units, but I'm losing money. But I don't have expendable money to use to say right now, Christmas coming up, where's the money come from to go spend Christmas and get tax dollars to go back into the economy? Not there. Not there. Reduce the amount, do away with the thing, and we'll love it. Okay, and we'll be able to spend some of that buying things that recoup tax, that you get money back on. Okay.
Are you allowed to rent your unit out?
No, I am not. I can't rent it. The park rents units, but I can't. My lease says I cannot rent. I have to be the owner on the title of the unit. I have to be there. No one else.
The owners of the mobile home park can rent the units out.
They rent units. Does that seem fair? No. They rent units to whoever, and they're also put in Section 8 units.
So who pays the tax on those units?
I don't know.
Good question.
We are.
Thank you for your comments, sir.
Okay. Hey, yeah, I just want to address court's recommendation here or idea before I actually start. Okay. Even at $25 a month, you are right, that turns into $30,000 for a real property tax value. Okay. But that's for less than 1/10 of an acre. So you're actually going to take and come up with over $300,000 from an acre of property. Okay, and I just think that's crazy. Okay, the idea, you know, it really, I don't know. It just baffles me that it even be allowed to go on because it's so outrageous. But any relief we could get, I'm sure we'd take, but it definitely needs to be repealed. You know, when we started this out about 2 months ago, in the 2 months, all the communities have paid in real property tax value, $10,333,000. Okay? At that cost, I'm almost going to tell you that you could buy every mobile home in every park for that money. And if you can't, I'm going to be very surprised that you're going to be very close to being able to get them for this tax. And this tax is not doesn't really have anything to do with the value of our home. Has everything to do with the space. It's a space tax. It's not a property tax. It's a space to be able to put our trailers in. Okay, and court mentioned about the property owners and values versus what apartment residents, there's a difference in that. We didn't make that problem. In 1963, evidently, the state decided that they can do assessments differently. And it appears to me that what they've done is use the backdoor approach to assign a tax to personal properties, which is what our mobile homes are. They're personal properties. You can't drive them on the highway, but they're still titled as a home, as a vehicle. Quick way to solve it, approach the legislature, ask them, hey, why are they being titled as vehicles? Since 1976, HUD's taken and recognized them as manufactured housing. Why aren't they titled as a home rather than a vehicle? Mr. Wagner should be able to tell you, when you take and go to closing on a home, you get a title and deed at closing to a home on a lot that you own. Why not get a title for a manufactured home as a home rather than a vehicle? But again, anybody think that $10,333,000 in 2 months from 935 residents is acceptable? I don't think it is, considering, and I don't know again, but I'm going to tell you that probably the average home is worth no more than $20,000, if that, in a mobile home park. I've suggested before that you go for a ride through a few mobile homes, just put a couple names in the hat, pick them out, 3, 4 of them, and drive through. You're going to find out that these homes or mobile home parks are really in need. Just in our community alone, within the last 2 weeks, our office put out an urgent call because one of the families was out of food and needed food. We addressed that concern by donations. We also took and made certain that they were connected with social services to be able to provide that support. People's cars are being repossessed because they can't afford to pay it. Today's newspaper, there are 4 mobile homes in Lakeside Park that are going to auction soon for foreclosure. Okay? This tax really puts an unfair burden on the residents in the park. We're in no way responsible for the way that the government is structured the assessments. No other person or renter in the county is assessed the tax that we are. And I challenge you to take and tell me that I have more benefits or access to programs in the county than a renter does in an apartment complex. We pay $274 a year to reimburse Lakeside, and that's a number that was assigned by court. I don't know if it's accurate, but we pay $274 a year as part of our rent, in addition to the $800 that we pay a year to park our trailer in a space of less than 1/10 of an acre. You can buy a whole acre, a good acre, for less than $30,000 in Washington County. And it's just crazy that you're collecting this tax after this long. And I have to be honest, you guys weren't even aware of this tax. You admitted it yourself when we first came in. You weren't even aware of this tax. So, you just didn't know how unfair it was. And it really is. It's a 56-year-old tax. It definitely needs to be repealed. 935 homes in this county are being affected by it. Some of the rents that are being, or the taxes that are being paid, Woodland pays $69.30 a month. Lakeside Village, $66.60. El Ranchero, $65.74. Spring Ridge Village, $65.09. Fortney's pays $45, and they're a year behind in contributing their tax to the county. Okay, Deer Lodge, $44.33. North Haven, $43.80. Scenic View, $15.80. Lashley, $15. That's what they contribute a month, because it's based on a percentage. And in reality, it's a hidden tax on property values. Okay. They've already discussed the 2 weeks with the office. We've already discussed the repossessions, the homes foreclosure. But this tax to some of these homes, or some of these people, represent 2 or 3 monthly car payments that they could make through a year. To me, it represents 2 months, almost 2 months, that I'm contributing of my rent, in addition to my rent, for this tax. All these parks have been around forever. You have Lakeside Village and Springfield Farms are the only 2 properties that are able to take and build out and add more homes at this point. And I want to mention that Springfield Farms is not contributing to tax at all through the mobile home tax, although it certainly appears that it should. They're paying taxes on the real assessed value of the properties that are on the land. And they do have plenty of room to build out. There's 22 homes already there on 150 acres. If you Google the address on it, you can look down on it from the satellite, and you'll see there's plenty of room there for them to expand, and it certainly appears that they are. Okay, I'm trying to hurry.
I know.
Okay.
Thank you for your understanding.
Okay, but you know, they've been around forever. You have Spring Ridge Village has been in place since 1950. Fortney Estates since 1957. Deer Lodge has been with 1965. Lakeside Village, 1973. And there's several others that I couldn't get information from, but I made a drive through, and I'm going to be surprised if they aren't from the 60s and the 50s because of the trailers that are on the lot. I'd just also like to mention that we're being double taxed. And our base rent, we're reimbursing the property owner for their assessed value. And before the tax is added on, and that's $274. And then in addition to the $800 turns into $1,070 or $107,000, okay, in real property tax dollars that I'm contributing for less than 1/10 of an acre. And when I measured, I was very generous on my measurements. Okay, so it's actually less than 1/10 of an acre. Basically, it's outrageous. We don't own that property, and again, we're not doing anything with the property except for placing a trailer on it or a mobile home. That's the only thing we're doing. It's just because it's space. And that's exactly what this tax is. It's a space tax. We don't own it. We can't claim the tax on our as a deduction on our income taxes because it's not recognized anywhere that we pay that tax. And what we're doing, we would like to have it repealed. The same as Baltimore, Anne Arundel, and Howard County. And 2 out of those 3 counties actually gave up the same amount of money that we're asking you to give up, $600,000. They walked away from it because it's unfair, it's double taxation, and it's just plain outrageous. And, you know, I would expect, and I don't know what's been going on in the background, but I would expect that I would expect that maybe Mr. Klein, okay, or maybe Treasurer Hershey, Ms. Reeves, would contact their equals in these counties, have a discussion with them, and find out why they took and rescinded it. Okay? Anne Arundel County refused to rescind it 1 year, and he came back the next year and did away with it. We're asking you to take and do this. You know, it does have a sense of urgency. People are losing their homes, they're losing their cars, and everything. There's a reason that we live in mobile homes. It's the last bastion of affordable housing that there is, and this tax is taking that away. It's totally taking it away.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Continuing with citizens' comments, is there anyone else who'd like to participate? Please come forward, state your name and address, please. Good evening.
My name is Kira Hammond. I live at 134 West, or that's my old address, 13410 Station Lane in Smithsburg. And I'm here on behalf of Citizens Above Partisanship, which some of you know is a nonpartisan political action committee in Washington County focused on encouraging local government to be cooperative and work across differences for the common good. One of our key priorities is ethics in government. So we were very excited when Commissioner Meinl Schmidt, I guess about a year ago, maybe a little more, proposed changes to the structure of the Ethics Commission. And then we were also hopeful when Commissioner Kiefer suggested an ad hoc review panel to review not just the structure of the commission, but also the ordinance itself. So needless to say, we were quite disappointed last week to find that no substantive changes had been recommended to either the structure of the commission or to the ordinance. But what really concerned us was the almost total lack of public input into the process by which those recommendations were, or as the case may be, were not made. Our research suggests that there was one public hearing held on this matter. It was on Tuesday, September 10th. There was one notice, small notice, in the Herald Mail about 5 days earlier about this meeting that was being held, this hearing. And that's all. To the best of our knowledge, this was not publicized via the county commissioner's email list. It did not appear on any county social media channels. It was not, and still is not, mentioned on the county's website. And so, big surprise, nobody went. So, leaving aside, perhaps, how uncomfortably close to a violation of the Maryland Open Meetings Act this is, it's inconsistent with the principle of transparency in government that I know you all value. And beyond even that, this kind of revision of a policy that affects the integrity of our county government really cannot be meaningfully discussed without substantive stakeholder input. And so even if the meeting had been announced, and even if people had known about it, you didn't get that. And so the input, the recommendations that were made were not based on input that is necessary for good recommendations. Therefore, we ask the board to do the following. Reconvene an ad hoc ethics review panel, which may or may not have the same membership as the original panel. Charge that panel to hold well-publicized meetings at a variety of locations around the county that extend beyond the upcoming holiday season, during which we assume people will be quite busy. Offer an option to give meaningful input online, a well-publicized, robust option, not just in writing by mail. Accept recommendations from this panel only after meaningful input from a diversity of stakeholders has effectively been gathered, and no sooner than 90 days from the beginning of the process. It's worth noting here that when the panel was originally, I don't want to say charged because I was unable to find a charge, but was originally approved, I suppose, it was given 90 days, and the process took nearly twice that long. So clearly no one's in a hurry. Finally, make all deliberations of this group public in the form of well-publicized open meetings and publicly available written minutes. We ask that this process begin immediately so as not to delay meaningful review of this very important issue any further. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other citizens who wish to participate? Seeing none, we will go to Mr. Goodrich. You're up.
Good evening, everyone. Steve Goodrich, Director of Planning and Zoning. I'm here this evening on behalf of the Historic District Commission to request that commissioners approve a revision to the demolition permit review process or policy that was originally adopted by the commissioners in 1989. The policy was created in response to demolition of several significant structures in Washington County without demolition permits or any consideration or opportunity to provide information to the owners about options or alternatives to demolition of those structures. The current policy that you have in your agenda this evening states that a demolition permit for any structure listed in the county's historic sites inventory must be referred to the Historic Commission for review and comment. That creates the opportunity for the commission to educate the owner who's applying for the demolition permit about preservation alternatives and other options to demolition. If there's opposition to the demolition permit by the Historic Commission, then the permit's reviewed or referred to the Planning Commission for an additional opinion from that body. And even if both bodies are opposed to the demolition, the permit is still issued, and the building can still come down at the owner's option. All of this is supposed to happen within 60 days. There's a 60-day time limit included in the current policy. The Historic District Commission's recommendation is to add, onto that 60 days, to add what they call a 90-day wait period. So there's more time to find preservation options or alternatives to the demolition. For example, consulting with experts about the real need. Does the building really need to be torn down? Is it really a danger? Consulting with experts about other alternatives to demolition or possible rehabilitation possibilities, discussing with the owner the options of tax credits, and possibly even finding a purchaser for the building who may be interested in rehabilitating it when the current owner is not really interested in that. And there's really not enough time to do that in the 60 days that's already in the policy, and that's why the Historic Commission is asking for the addition of the 90-day wait period. In the end, if you adopt a revision to the policy with the 90-day wait period, if there is no alternative found to demolition, then the demolition permit will still be issued as it is now. In your agenda, you have the original policy, and the requested revisions are shown in red. I hope they're shown in red in the copy that you have. And it's really fairly simple. It's simply adding a 90-day wait period. You also have in your agenda a step-by-step, the step-by-step process that the staff goes through to receive the permit from the building permits office and the steps we go through to get it in front of the commission and the planning commission and the kind of information that's exchanged back and forth. So once again, the request on behalf of the Historic Commission is to revise the current demolition permit review policy and add that 90-day wait period. Before you take action on this, if you're inclined, before you take action on this, which is approval of the revised policy, you may want to listen to the comments of the Historic Advisory Committee, which is also on the agenda this evening, right after me. I know they have several topics that they would like to present to you, and one of them is this demolition permit review policy. The advisory committee has some additional recommendations on top of the 90-day review period. I want to take just a minute to highlight the distinction between the Historic District Commission, which is the group that's recommending the change in the policy, and the Historic Advisory Committee, which is on the agenda after me. The Historic District Commission was created in 1987 with adoption of the new Historic Preservation Zoning District. That commission has the authority to review and approve building permits in the Historic Preservation Zone, and to review and approve tax credits, property tax credits for those same properties. The tax credit ordinance was adopted in 1990, and that's a county ordinance. The Historic District Commission is assigned the responsibility to implement the policy that we're talking about and that we're suggesting there be a revision to. The Historic Advisory Committee is tasked with, and I'm paraphrasing, selecting and ranking major and minor historic areas and sites and the desired requirements for protection of historic areas in the county. That's a paraphrase of the minutes of the county commissioners from 1967 when the Historic Advisory Committee was first appointed based upon a recommendation from the Planning Commission to the county commissioners to perform that task. It was seen as a needed task at that time, 1967. That was quite a while ago. That committee's resulting report led to the original historic preservation zoning that we got in 1973, and that was also a precursor to the historic inventory that was conducted in 1973 through 1978. So they had an originating hand in the preservation activity in Washington County. The Historic Advisory Committee is advisory to the commissioners. They answer directly to you and provide advice on your request. So once again, I'm requesting on behalf of the Historic District Commission a revision to the demolition permit review policy to add the 90-day wait period. I can answer any questions if you have them, or we can go straight to
I do
the
have a
advisory
question.
committee.
Just for clarification. So right now, if I go in there and I put for a demolition permit, which they pull my address and it's historic, okay?
Right.
So then I have a 60-day wait period, correct? Right now?
Yes, yes.
So then if this would be revised, or my confusion, is it another 90 on top of the 60 or 90?
Yes. Yes.
So now
No.
we're at 150 days.
Yes, yes.
And what's the planning commission's, what have you seen their position on this?
The Planning Commission, I think their recommendations have been split equally, and they have, in some cases, been opposed to the demolition because they see alternatives for demolition. Old houses in new subdivisions, they can easily be put on their own lot and then rehabilitated by an interested new buyer.
Well, and I'm on the planning commission, but I'm thinking, I know we just went through one, and I don't vote just for full disclosure on things like this, but I know that there was a gentleman, I forget, we just went through it a couple months ago.
Right. That's a little bit different situation, but to answer your question, the Planning Commission has been on both sides. In some cases, they've been opposed to the demolition, and other cases, they haven't been opposed or they haven't formed any opinion at all. In the end, the permit is still issued, though.
Yeah, the permit is, yeah, 150 days seems, to me, I got to think about it a little bit, it seems a little extreme, but anyway.
That's why I'm presenting it here for you.
An incident where they don't have to wait the additional 90 days, is there?
We could have something like that where the permit, the demolition permit is applied for, it goes to the Historic Commission, the owner's there, he explains the need for the property to be demolished. The building could be so far gone that there's no possibility of it being restored. The building could be considered not really significant. It could be average or routine old building with no historic importance. The Historic Commission could say, we're not opposed to the demolition, and it would end right there. The permit would be issued. We wouldn't have to go to the Planning Commission, and there'd be no discussion about trying to save it. That happens very often. That's one way that the process can play out.
I'm sure in some instances, after 90 days would be needed.
Pardon me, after 90 days?
In some cases, the 90 days, the additional 90 days could very well be needed, depending on the property itself. But I'm sure there's properties that
Well, you're saying the property could be so run down that after
So who would
60,
make the
they would.
decision
If the
to
Historic
say we
Commission,
don't have to wait 90 additional days?
if the Historic Commission at the first review, if the Historic Commission determines that the building's not significant enough and they are not opposed to the demolition, then I would respond to the permits department right away within a couple of days, and the permit would be issued. That could happen as quickly as 10 to 15 days from the initial application. There's a bit of a timing issue here depending on when the permit is actually applied for, when the Historic Commission has its regular meeting.
But in that scenario, it doesn't need the 60 days then.
Right.
The only way it would go in the 90 days is if they, recommended the demolition permit not be issued. So then we waited the 60, they recommended not be issued, and then there's an additional 90 days. So, but in that scenario that it was so bad and so gone that they're not saying we don't want this, it's not even going to go into those 90 days. So it wouldn't be needed in that scenario.
I'm not sure I understood what you said.
The
sorry.
HDC does not, if the HDC is not against the demolition,
Right.
then we're not going to need that additional 90 days no matter what.
That's right, that's correct. And we would not wait that additional 90 days. We'd go
Is
ahead.
that
and-
written in there? Is that written clearly?
Pardon me?
Is that written clearly in here?
I don't think it's spelled out, but it can be. We certainly can add that there, but it's routine. As soon as the Historic Commission reviews, and if they have no opposition, it's routine for us to respond to the permits department to go ahead and issue the permit.
I think it's pretty, it says, maximum 60 days of the application, except if either body would recommend the demolition permit not be issued. So if no one's against it, it's going to be issued at the 60 days or earlier.
Earlier, almost always earlier. The commission is open to, of course, they're asking for the additional 90-day, but the commission is open to other revisions to make the policy clearer. If that's what you'd like to have done, we can certainly take that recommendation or take that requirement. I mean, it's your policy.
I'm
can have it say
sort
what
of
you
on
want
the
it to
fence
say.
with it because, I think 150 days is a long time. We seem like we're over, I don't want to get into a position where I'm telling people what they can do with their land and their property, but then again, I'm not anti-historic. Heck, I'm going to say I'm historic. But, I think, we cross a line somewhere where we're really dictating to people who own their own property sometimes what they can and cannot do. And I've seen it, many, many times in my line of work. And we do regulate with zoning and everything else, but I'm just, the 60 days, it seems like, has worked until this year.
Well, no, we've had other situations where we had a very significant building and there just wasn't enough time to gather the resources to try to educate the property owner. Sometimes the property owner simply isn't interested, and you could have a year to work on it, and it's just not going to work.
So what happens is, I know it's happened. Okay, so I get my demolition permit. It comes up historical list. We're waiting 60 days, and I go ahead and tear my house down in 30. What's the penalty?
If you have demolished it without your demolition permit being issued,
Well, they hold it up for 60 days if it's on.
well,
they
no,
don't-
as soon as we go to the Historic Commission and the commission says we have no opposition,
Yeah, right.
then the permits department can issue the permit.
Gotcha.
And that could happen in less than 30 days. And so as you, as the property owner, would be able to go forward with your demolition in less than 30 days.
I mean, 150 days to me is a little, I'm not saying this for sure. I'm still thinking about it.
Well, let me
It seems
suggest,
like a little bit extraordinarily long to me.
if you want to come back with a different time period, the Historic Commission is open to any, it's your policy. And if you're inclined to revise it, but not quite as much, that would be your prerogative.
For me, I'd like to hear from the Historical Advisory Committee before we made any decision on that, if that's.
Yeah,
I would too.
Thank you.
Sure.
Next, the Historic Advisory Committee. Please come forward, introduce yourself, and any members in the audience that you like.
Good evening. I'm Ralph Young. I'm one of the co-chairs of the advisory committee at this time. And on behalf of the members of the advisory committee, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening about several important issues. We like to meet with you at least once a year or twice a year to bring up different issues. As you know, we are truly blessed in this county with a treasure of wonderful historic structures and beautiful farmland that we need to preserve for future generations. That's a great thing for us. So one of the issues to talk about, and it goes right to this demolition permitting process. Over the years, we have lost some significant historic homes have been demolished without regard to their historic significance to our community. Some have been demolished in the middle of the night so that no one could stop the process. For example, the Stone Tavern, the 18th century Stone Tavern at Jones Crossroads, if you remember that years ago, there on Sharpsburg Pike. Once the historic community was aware of and raised concern about the pending demolition of the tavern, and I was one of those who raised some concern, the developer raced in during the night and demolished enough of the tavern, so it was unable to save it. It wasn't worthwhile. Enough of the tavern was gone that it couldn't be saved. Now we sit with a convenience store on the site. And I don't know if you ever visited the Francis who owned that tavern years ago, that building. They had a Christmas shop in back of it. Any of you ever visit that? Maybe I'm showing my age here, but the people treasured that house. I'm telling you, we went into the house and they treasured it, but it's gone now. Most recently, we lost a significant 18th century stone home on Manor Church Road that was part of that community. Our committee would like to recommend strengthening the county demolition permit process. And we recommend that if the HDC is opposed to the demolition of a historic structure, there should be an additional 90-day waiting period to issue a demolition permit. And this would allow time for the historic community to evaluate the property and discuss possible preservation or alternatives with the property owner. And it could mean at least a salvage of the materials or documenting the building. When you get into documenting a historic structure, it's not something you can do in a few days.
Repurposing like mantle and windows.
Could be repurposing, yes. I mean, I think that building, a lot of it was burned, unfortunately, this last one. And we also recommend that increasing the fine for demolition of a property without a permit, and this is someone who's not gotten a permit. Right now it's $100. That's nothing. Absolutely, that is not a deterrent at all, $100. So we'd like to at least see it go up to $1,000, along with denial of a building permit for 1 year. This is what they're doing. They're breaking the law. The law requires you to have a permit to demolish the building. If they do it without a permit, they should pay. There should be repercussions. So we recommend strengthening the fine and denying a building permit for 1 year. And I think that would maybe maybe have some people think about what they're doing, and you wouldn't see things happen like happened to the Jones Crossroads Tavern years ago.
That would be for historical structures.
Yes.
Designated.
Yes.
Who does the designation?
I mean, that's up to, again, it's going to come to the Historic District Commission to determine the value of that property. And the next thing I had for the night was talk about, I'm going to pass these out. Members of the committee, Sandy Iser, Pat Schooley, been working with Steve Goodrich. Thanks. On sure that would talk about tax credits and explain them. Tax credits for historic preservation at the state and county level really can be very confusing. So we're trying to put it into a format that this can be, Steve Goodrich can give this if someone comes in to his office. They could go to real estate offices. A real estate person having this and being able to give it to someone who is purchasing a historic property, it'd be a big help to them, and it would also encourage people to restore a building for the tax credits. And it could just be handed out. This also, we've talked about being mailed out with county tax bills, again, to educate people on what is available for them. So this is almost complete. Steve worked with Sandy Iser, and there's a few little tweaks to the brochure to make it a little bit more understandable, and it should be ready to go and for the county to have this printed. And the last thing I'm asking for is our committee, again, it is your committee, the advisory committee, and we would like to request a $500 budget for our committee. It's not much, but it's a little something to cover. This would cover numerous expenses. I mean, we're having to pay for these tonight. I mean, and they're not cheap to have printed up to give to you. That's just an example, but we're all, we need probably printer cartridges, paper, the office supplies, and we'd also like for the county to cover our committee for the John Fry Preservation Award banquet. We do the work to organize that, and we feel that if members would cover the costs for them. So we appreciate anything you can do to, like I say, a $500 budget to cover our committee. And years ago there was a budget for the committee, and that sort of disappeared. And then the last topic.
Do you remember what that budget amount was years ago?
No, I don't. No, I don't.
Well, and let us check, we might be able to do some of this in-house for you, too, to
Well,
save extra
yeah, and that
cost.
will be done. That will be done in house. I mean, but
I
just
mean,
to get
with
something.
here with us, to save
Right.
you the printer and paper and
Right.
maybe there are things that we can work out.
But we print our agendas, we print our minutes. There's a lot of expenses we're taking out of our pocket. And again, for the Historic Preservation Awards banquet, our members attend, but they're paying for that out of pocket, and we feel that we are a county committee, and we'd like to have that covered, that little bit covered for each person, because we do a lot of work in organizing that for you all, the banquet. And then the last topic is local concerns. We want to thank you for your concern about siting solar facilities properly in our county. We are blessed with some beautiful farmland and farms, and we need to be creative with the placement of solar facilities while protecting our farmland and historic structures. So we do applaud you for attending all public hearings on solar facilities so that we get something that fits in with our land planning. The committee also wants to express concern over some current threats to some historic structures in our county. A developer wants to develop a property near the intersection of I-81 and Route 68 near Williamsport. The convenience store and overnight trucks parking lot will impact an historic house, the Garden of Eden, most likely resulting in the demolition of the house. Another property, the city of Hagerstown is currently discussing the historic fairgrounds entrance building, and they're considering the demolition of a portion of the building, and we are concerned. And another structure, the old Surrey School, which is up for sale near City Park, is currently empty, and we're concerned for its fate. It's one of few old schools that are still standing, and we hope it can be adaptively used while being preserved. Do you have any questions for me? Okay. I do thank you for.
Thank you. What I'd like to do is to put some of this information together and get back to Steve Goodrich and consider some of your proposals. I'm not 100% against, but I'm not all for them. So I'd like to maybe have some time but I'm not against your budget. Maybe we can work out together and figure out how we can do things in-house and give you a budget, because we often do that for our committee. So that's
Okay.
all right.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Steve, we'll be in touch with you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I just want to reiterate for you so you know that the revisions to the demolition permit policy will not prevent the permit from being issued. The only change is the addition of the 90-day wait period.
Yeah. All right, or the fine or the building permit, if we would consider that. Excuse me. All right, thank you. Appreciate you all coming in. Thank you. Next, Chris Lehman. Presentation of the June 30th, 2019 audit financial statement.
Yeah, I'm going to be departing. I have a viewing that I want to go to, so I'm going to head out that way.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Appreciate that. Please introduce yourself and the matter.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Chris Lehman with SB & Company, and what I'm here to present is the results of the fiscal year 2019 audit. So I'll walk through the presentation that I have here. We were engaged to perform an audit of the June 30, 2019 financial statements of the county, as well as perform the Uniform Guidance Single Audit. That's a federally mandated audit for any organization that receives and spends more than $750,000 of federal funding per year. There's also 2 federal Form 990s that are tax exempt IRS forms that are required to be completed annually for both the golf course and the agricultural center. We also complete a number of various state compliance type reports. There's an agricultural land transfer report. There's agreed upon procedures we do for the landfill. There's a schedule of fire and rescue expenditures, an audit of the 911 trust fund, and an audit or a agreed upon procedures for the detention center. There's also various filings that we have to review and submit. With that, there's the state charitable registration, the uniform financial report that goes to the state upon completion of the financial statements. And lastly, we complete the data collection form that's required for the single audit. So those are all, that's the scope of everything we've been engaged to do for under this contract. The next slide, oops, I think I just skipped it. The next slide shows a summary of the results. We've issued a clean or unmodified opinion on the financial statements. That would be the best opinion we can give under professional standards. We did not discover any instances of fraud. A fraud audit is not a financial statement audit is not a fraud-specific audit, but we are required to have a healthy skepticism that it could be perpetrated by anyone at any time. We didn't discover any material weaknesses in the internal controls. We received the full cooperation of management, so any records that we requested, we obtained adequate backup for those, and any questions that we had, we obtained adequate answers and support for those as well. We didn't post any or propose any audit journal entries. That just speaks to the quality of the books throughout the year, and that it doesn't take the year-end audit to get the numbers adjusted properly. This slide just shows a picture of our risk-based audit approach, which in this process we use to also look at the control environment as it relates to the processes that affect the financial statements, which I'll walk through those results here. We look at the control environment from 5 interrelated components. There's the control environment, there's the risk assessment process, information and communication, control activities, and monitoring. And under the year under audit, we concluded that the environment was effective. Furthermore, we look at key processes that impact the financial statements. We look at treasury. We look at estimates within the financial statements. We look at management's process to close the books and accumulate the information that's necessary for the financial statements. We look at the expenditure and disbursement cycle. In all cases, we concluded that the design and operation of those controls was effective during the period under audit. Furthermore, we also look at the payroll, revenue, fixed asset, and grant compliance processes as part of the audit. And we've also concluded that those design and operation of controls was effective for the period. The last few slides here is all the gory required communications, and I won't read every one of them to you. A lot of these I highlighted at the beginning, but if we had difficulties getting through the audit, where if we had disagreements with management, if there were barely acceptable accounting policies, if we had adjustments, material weaknesses, or things of that nature, I'd be required to bring that to the commissioner's attention through this process. There's really nothing negative I'd have to bring to your attention through the audit process. The financial statements were completed and filed with the state on a timely basis. We had no single audit findings, so it was a clean audit from that perspective. Are there any questions I can answer about the audit process? I'm sorry, it's not the most exciting topic to talk about.
I'm having fun. Keep going.
But I think the results here really speak positively on management's process, and we're really relying on the controls that they have in place throughout the year, and just the timeliness that they can get the financial statements together, and for us to be able to come in and do an efficient audit, speaks to the finance department. And that's all I have.
Oh, you're done.
Clean audit, no problems, is what you're saying? We cooperated.
Yes.
You could have said that from the beginning. We good.
Any,
Well, I didn't want to be too short.
thank you for your report. Commissioners, any
Thank you very
comments,
much.
questions, or anything? Sarah, anything to add?
Sarah, that's a good job. I guess that falls back on you.
It falls on my team.
Say
It's a
thank
team
you.
effort.
Congratulations. I know auditing is fun to go through with everybody there getting it done. So
There is a lot
Thank
of
you.
work that goes into the audit every year, and the team does an incredible job keeping on schedule and all of the different components that have to come together to make it a success. So I'd like to just thank them for
How long a
everything that
process
they
did
do.
you spend on the audit? How long, what did it take?
15 minutes, right?
No, I mean, we do it in two phases. So we come out before the books are closed to audit transactions. So we do walkthroughs and transactional testing. That takes about a week. And then we come back out for our final field work once the books are closed, all the accounts have been reconciled. That takes a couple weeks on site, and it's probably about another week in the office to just get the report together and the financial statements and go through quality control and review on those.
The process begins in June, and it normally ends at the end of October.
Yep.
Good. Hearing no more questions, we thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Congratulations to all on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing nothing else on our agenda, a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank